The Red River game may send the loser down the river and out of contention in the Big 12. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking it down with Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football. It is the game that we all look forward to, regardless of your fandom outside the Big 12. It's Oklahoma, Texas. It's one of the great rivalries in college football. And regardless of the records or the situation in the Big 12, still huge. And again, possibly, depending on other factors, an elimination game, especially for the Sooners. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. Thanks for having me on. And, as you mentioned, it's always this is one of those rivalries where you kind of throw the records and the rankings out the door. Over the last few years, it has been a really good game in terms of both teams have been very highly ranked, certainly within the top 25, but then within the top, the top 10 and top 15 as well. So this game looks a little bit different this year, but it certainly doesn't lack from an importance standpoint, as you mentioned, particularly for Oklahoma right now.
All right, Jason, let's talk about the Sooners. What looks different to me is that they're making more mistakes on offense, more turnovers that are typically blamed on the quarterback. But the last throw he made against Kansas State, I think, was clearly an overthrow. Just he got hyped up and just zinged it, and it was a bad throw. Also, lack of a rushing game. So we think Oklahoma, we think prolific offense through the air, and that's what we think about. But this has been one of the best rushing teams in the nation during this run of excellence, and they're averaging 3.6 yards per play. Also, the wide receivers are still good, but maybe they don't have that one special guy or two special guys that they've had most recently with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Mark. And and as we kind of look at this, and then we kind of rewind back into the to the preseason in the summer as we were talking about this, it's not all together too non-surprising, not surprising. You have a redshirt freshman quarterback who's really played in no meaningful snaps up until this season. You have probably what looks to be the fourth and fifth string running backs coming into this season with the suspensions of Ramondre Stevenson. And then, of course, Trey Sermon being out, moving over to Ohio State. And, of course, the running back had made the decision to opt out through the COVID era. So, you have a fourth and fifth string running back that you're looking at. Receivers very well made, just in terms of having that playmaker there. You have Charleston Rambo, who looks like, maybe he's not really well equipped to be a number one guy, losing CeeDee Lamb, losing Marquise Brown, of course, 2 years ago. That's taken its toll on Oklahoma. Still, having said that, they scored 35 against Kansas State. They scored 30 against Iowa State. At the very least, they put the Sooners put themselves in contention to win those games. But to your point, really bad pass by Rattler in the Kansas State game. Overthrow effectively ended that. You saw him, maybe have a little bit more trust in his arm than he should have, being able to fit it into any spot that he thought. And then, that last play against Iowa State, the deep ball turnover, there was a little bit of pass interference that was missed, but still, maybe not necessarily the best decision, that you would see, that you could see made in that situation. Obviously you can see the talent is there. The arm strength is there. He's completing almost 75% of his passes, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. But I think at a school like Oklahoma, the mishaps is something more that kind of gets more attention, and, I think you feel a little bit for Rattler. I think he's taken some, he's taken some criticism that maybe is not completely deserved. Yes, he's made a couple of bad decisions on some throws, but, I think the Oklahoma fans, Barry Switzer long ago called it, feeding the monster. The monster, they've not been, Oklahoma hasn't been 1-2 since 1998, 22 years. If they lose this game, will be the first time that they've went 1-3 since 1968. So, I think, to say that coming into this game is a must win is, it's very cliche in our sport, a must win, but I don't think that you can put this any other way for for this team that's dropped 2 in a row.
1968, a very special year for 2 reasons, wink, wink. And you could probably guess one. There's no way anyone's going to get the other. But if you have a guess, leave it down in the comment section, along with your score prediction on the game, Texas, Oklahoma. A lot of people that I've seen both as a national pundit, but also on the fan level, the viewers of this channel, Jason, are surprised that Texas is an underdog in this game and that Oklahoma's a bit of a favorite. Texas having their own issues, but they are a goal line play, most likely a fumble by Keontae Ingram of remaining undefeated, despite giving up 56 points to Texas Tech and getting taken to the wire and then finally losing to TCU. So Texas could be undefeated. They're in a better position with just the one conference loss, but on the flip side, they're having their issues too.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your first point, Mark, kind of thinking about this and, talking it over with some of our colleagues there at Last Word on College Football, I thought that coming into the game, you'd probably see Texas at a 4 to 5 point favorite coming into this. So I think I was, maybe a little bit definitely surprised to see, Oklahoma at the 2.5, 3 point pick coming into this game. So I'm not sure. Maybe Vegas knows more than we do in terms of these two teams. But, on the defensive side, like both teams have been, awful. I mean, there's no really other way to put it through the first couple of games. Oklahoma has struggled tackling the ball, tackling the ball carrier. Alex Grinch has put such an emphasis on turnovers and getting turnovers. Lincoln Riley even said in his midweek press conference that, maybe there's been too much of an emphasis on forcing turnovers and they haven't been as good tackling. They've looked to take a bit of a step back early on in the season. And I think one of those is really you just see the most glaring, and we've talked about this before, Mark, but the most glaring thing that you see in the secondary is just the lack of height. They don't have anyone over 6 feet tall. They're high. Their tallest guy is 5'11". So in the secondary, so Iowa State certainly was able to take control of that and take advantage of that going in. So it'll be interesting to see. Oklahoma obviously gave up 38 to take Kansas State, 37 to Iowa State, and then you have Texas on the other side that gave up, to your point, 56 against Texas Tech, and then gave up in the 30s there against TCU last week. So I think at this point it may be a really just a battle of who can get enough stops. And I think one of the things that we're seeing from just to go back to the last point about the Oklahoma offense, the Oklahoma offense has been so good in the past. They've been able to mask some of these inefficiencies on the defensive side, particularly, in conference play in the regular season. And the offense is not quite as good, not quite as explosive. So maybe, that's what we've seen. They're not able to mask some of these, challenges that they've seen. And really, it's been a tale of two halves for Oklahoma. The first half they've done fairly well. They held Kansas State to 7 points in the first. Held Kansas State to 14 in the first half of play. Held Iowa State to 13 in the first half. It's just kind of come off the bus. The wheels have come off the bus, so to speak. And really, the fourth quarter and both of those games giving up 24 and 24 and 28 points respectively in both of those games. So I think, whether you look at, fatigue being a factor for, both Oklahoma and Texas, I think it's going to be one of those games who can force the other quarterback into the big mistake, who can come up with a big play on defense. And, you have Ellinger as a fifth-year senior with Texas, who has a lot of the experience and you would think what might be a little bit more poised to understand what that atmosphere is like, even though it's not certainly going to be the same atmosphere that you typically see in a Red River game, to be able to take advantage of that.
Seems, of course, as though Sam Ellinger's been around forever, but this will be his last regular season Texas-Oklahoma game.
Yeah.
And, of course, I just can't imagine him having any more incentive than that. Not that he doesn't play hard every snap as it is. Spencer Rattler, let's focus once again on him just in regards to the people that you talk to, the Oklahoma fans, in regards to their viewpoint of his play, because especially it gets magnified at the quarterback position. If you take 60 or 70 snaps and you throw it 40 times, you can be making some great throws. You can be showing your athleticism, and certainly he can make all the throws, and that's why there's so much the hype coming into this. But
Right.
you can make the two critical mistakes,
Mhm.
and those are going to get magnified, and they are going to lose big games against tough opponents down the stretch. Are people just saying, hey, it's a development process, growing process, or this kid's not what we expected him to be?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, Mark, and really the people that I talk to. I think it's more of a development progress. Look, this is one of the things on the offensive line. Oklahoma was returning 5 starters from last year, so this was something that I think the team and I think specifically Rattler thought he wouldn't have to worry about pass protection. Turns out the offensive line is clearly the most disappointing unit within the team so far this year. You kind of mentioned that they were only running just a clip over 3 yards per carry. That's in Riley's last few years they've been well over 5 yards per carry on the team, and you're seeing Rattler. It started in the Kansas State game. He's leaving the pocket a little bit too early, kind of from a development standpoint. He was much better against Iowa State, but I think one of those things, if you're constantly under pressure and you're constantly having to move, I think you're going to have a tendency to obviously want to flee the pocket maybe a little bit earlier than maybe you need to. And I think that's the maturation that you'll see. You saw it from Kansas State to Iowa State. Now I think Oklahoma is certainly going to face a stronger defensive front from Texas than they did either against Kansas State or Iowa State. So I think it's just it's the expectations are so high. You follow in the footsteps of 2 Heisman Trophy winners, a second place Heisman Trophy winner in Jalen Hurts last year. And so the expectations are so high. So even to be good, not great, sometimes in the eyes of the fans maybe isn't good enough. But really looking at it from I think inside the program, from a coach's perspective, I don't know that anyone's upset with certainly how he's playing. Decision making is something that's key, that comes with the time that he gets to play, and I think that will come along and be better as the season grows on. But it's one of those things he's going to have to, with them being 1 and 2, defense not necessarily playing very well. He's going to be expected to grow up very quickly, and it's an awful difficult ask to have him to grow up very quickly and have a lot of the weight on his shoulders in a game like this.
What I can't figure out at Texas is obviously they've stockpiled defensive recruiting classes that have been top 5 to 10 in the nation. You can make an excuse. Well, the excuse wouldn't be in the recruiting, but the development on the Oklahoma side. But for Texas, it's not like they had one good recruiting year on the defensive side. It's been stockpiled for a long time here, and they just can't put together, regardless of the defensive coordinator, which of course there's been a change this year, that they can get it right on that side of the ball. 56 points against Texas Tech.
Yeah, it's Mark. It's kind of mind-boggling. I mean, I mentioned that stat about Barry Switzer talking about the monster. When he was coaching, he said if I was at Texas, I would have won 7 to 8 national championships, just because of the fact of the talent that state was able to pull in. And so to your point, Mark, that the problem hasn't been recruiting. I think it's been more of development and being able to make the plays on the field, whether it be with Herman or with Charlie Strong before that, and even to an extent under Mac Brown, they still underachieved. They only won the one national title under Vince Young, of course, that year where they beat USC. But yeah, I think they've seen a consistency of under playing. They haven't played well. They haven't performed well. They really haven't seemed to be complementary of one another. They'll have one year where the defense is actually strong, but the offense maybe not, maybe is lacking a little bit, or what seems to have happened thus far this year. They've for the most part, they've had a strong offense, been able to move the ball fairly easily. And they're having a pretty solid season thus far, but the defense hasn't been able to put it together. So I think if they're able to put it together, Texas certainly can make a run for the Big 12, if they're able to win this game. But I think it's one of those things where they've got to get consistency, and they've got to have good play complementary on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it's just kind of strange because Tom Herman came on the scene as an offensive coach. He took over a very strong defense from Charlie Strong. And his first season, Tom Herman's, they played really good defense. They may have been the best defense in the Big 12. They lost a ton of players to the NFL from that team, but you figured, okay, well, Tom Herman's going to fix the offense because the offense is broken right now and the defense looks strong and carried them to a bowl win in Tom Herman's first year. Well, he's fixed the offense for the most part, and now the defense has fallen apart, which with an offensive head coach, you might be able to reason that, but the defensive recruiting has been exceptional, so they haven't figured it out for whatever reason. But I'm guessing that nobody's expecting a lack of points in this one.
No, I mean, I really can't imagine a situation where, either team's able to hold the other team under, 28, 31 points in this game. I think it's very strange. I mean, going into this game, years and years of watching this game, things happen in this game, maybe more than any other game that, you don't expect, coming into the season. Been so many times Oklahoma has had, highly ranked teams have been big favorites, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, and they've just not played well in this game. So it'll be interesting to see, to your point about Oklahoma being 2.5 point favorites. But I think the consensus among the fans, media, and just everybody kind of looking at these two teams, they think looks like Texas is the better team. But you've never seen, at least in quite some time, I don't think you'll ever see an Oklahoma team that is more desperate for a win. It's kind of interesting to say that this early in the season, but more desperate for a win than they are now. Because if you lose this game, you're obviously out of the Big 12 race. You have, essentially nothing to play for except for pride. You have a bowl game, but with Oklahoma being in the playoff for the last 3 years, how excited would they be, to go to a mid-tier bowl? So, this, even though that, like I said, even though the rankings aren't high, there's still so much to play for both teams here.
So do we get a prediction from you at Last Word on College Football? Is that the deal?
Yeah, I can give a prediction. I think, like I said, going into this, Oklahoma 1-2, they've lost two conference games for the first time since 1998, which is before Stoops was even on board. You have both teams are playing with desperation, right? You have Texas with just the one conference loss, but effectively, if Oklahoma wins this game, though they're even on the loss column, they have the head-to-head. Something tells me that Oklahoma's going to find a way here. I think there's been some things that I've heard this week about some maybe infighting within the locker room, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. There's a lot of push for getting some of the newer kids on the field because some of the older kids just haven't really played well. Some of the, Trey Brown is one. Brendan Radley-Hiles is another that has just, both of them has really played bad to start the year. So, I think you might see some, you might see some changes. You might see a team, rallying around each other. So I'll say, from a prediction standpoint, I'll say Oklahoma wins 34-28.
All right. My prediction on Patreon, please sign up at Patreon. 27-17 against the spread through 3 weeks of Power 5 college football, 27-17 against the spread. So check us out on Patreon. Jason, appreciate you stopping by. Everybody check him out on Last Word on College Football, and enjoy the game.
All right. Thanks for having me on.